Kylvin stood at the observation window of the Crimson Spire, looking down at the human colony below. The planet they called New Montana stretched out beneath him, covered in green forests and blue rivers. Small cities dotted the landscape, connected by roads that looked like thin white threads from this height. He felt nothing but contempt as he watched. The Zixthari ambassador had been in space for most of his adult life. He had visited hundreds of worlds and negotiated with dozens of alien species. In all that time, he had learned one simple truth about the galaxy. The strong survived. The weak served. That was the natural order of things, and the Zixthari Empire had been strong for over 3,000 years. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had joined the Galactic Council only 7 years ago. In that short time, Kylvin had learned everything he needed to know about them. They were soft. They smiled too much. They apologized for things that were not their fault. They wanted everyone to like them. These were clear signs of weakness. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. Commander Velkoth entered the observation room. The military officer was larger than Kylvin, with darker scales and scars from many battles. He moved to stand beside the ambassador and looked down at the colony with cold eyes. "We have been here for 3 weeks," Velkoth said. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "The humans have given us everything we asked for. Mining rights, trade routes, territory. They give and give, like frightened children offering candy to bullies." Kylvin nodded slowly. He had thought the same thing many times. Governor Lucas Hayes, the human leader of this colony, had agreed to almost every demand. The man was a former teacher who had entered politics to help his people. He spoke in a quiet voice and often paused to consider his words carefully. To Kylvin, this seemed like the behavior of someone who was afraid. "They are perfect candidates for client status," Kylvin said. "Within a generation, we could have them fully integrated into the Empire. They would work for us, provide resources, and cause no trouble. It would be simple." Commander Velkoth made a sound that was almost like laughter, but harder. "Too simple," he said. "I do not trust it. We should test them. Push them harder. See if they have any spine at all. If they break, we take what we want. If they somehow find courage, then we know what we are dealing with." Kylvin turned to look at the commander. "What kind of test did you have in mind?" "The settlement below us," Velkoth said, pointing down at the largest city on the planet. "Riverside, they call it. 43,000 humans live there. We will demand they evacuate it. All of them. Tell them we need it for a military outpost. If they agree, we know they are truly weak. If they refuse, we simply take it by force. Either way, we win." Kylvin considered this. It was aggressive, perhaps too aggressive. But then again, that was how the Zixthari Empire had always operated. They pushed until someone pushed back. Most species never did. The few that tried were crushed quickly and served as examples to others. "Very well," Kylvin said. "I will make the demand this afternoon. Prepare your forces just in case, though I doubt we will need them." 3 hours later, Kylvin sat across from Governor Lucas Hayes in the negotiation chamber. The room was simple and comfortable, with large windows that showed the mountains in the distance. The governor had his usual calm expression. Beside him sat Katie Sullivan, a human woman in her 30s who served as an advisor and historian. She had intelligent eyes that made Kylvin slightly uncomfortable, though he could not say why. Governor Hayes poured tea for everyone, a human custom that Kylvin found strange but tolerated. The governor always made an effort to be hospitable. It was another sign of weakness, in Kylvin's opinion. "Ambassador, what brings you here today?" Governor Hayes asked. His voice was friendly and open. Kylvin set down his cup and folded his hands on the table. "The Empire has been reviewing our needs for this sector," he began. "We have determined that we require a permanent military presence on New Montana. Specifically, we need the area currently occupied by your settlement of Riverside." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Governor Hayes stopped moving. Katie Sullivan set down her datapad very slowly and carefully. The friendly atmosphere vanished like smoke and wind. "You want us to evacuate Riverside?" Governor Hayes asked. His voice was quieter than before, but somehow it carried more weight. "Yes," Kylvin said. He felt a small stirring of unease, but pushed it down. "We will, of course, provide compensation and assistance with relocation, but we need that location for strategic purposes." There was a long silence. Governor Hayes looked at Katie Sullivan. She looked back at him. Something passed between them. some kind of understanding that needed no words. Then the governor turned back to Calvin. Ambassador Calvin, the governor said slowly, I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You are demanding that we force 43,000 people to leave their homes. These are families who have lived in Riverside for 2 generations. They have built businesses, schools, hospitals, and parks. They have memories in every street and building. And you want us to move them all because you need a military base? That is correct, Calvin said. He tried to sound confident, but something in the governor's tone made him nervous. Governor Hayes nodded slowly. Then he stood up. Katie Sullivan stood as well. The governor looked at Calvin with eyes that were no longer friendly. I need to tell you something, Ambassador, the governor said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. We have been very patient with you and your people. We have accepted your demands even when they were unreasonable. We have compromised on things that mattered to us. We did this because we believe in giving everyone a chance to do the right thing. We believe in diplomacy and peaceful solutions. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. But there are lines we will not cross, he continued. Our people are not bargaining chips. Their homes are not commodities to be traded. You have just crossed that line, Ambassador. Calvin felt a chill run through him. Are you refusing? He asked. Do you understand what that means? Katie Sullivan spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold and precise, like a surgical instrument. Oh, we understand perfectly, Ambassador. Let me help you understand something. We know what the Zixthari Empire is. We know what you do. We have studied your history very carefully. She walked to a display screen on the wall and brought up files. Calvin saw dates, locations, and names scroll past. His own name appeared several times. In the year 2251, you forced the Talani people to give up their primary colony world, Katie said. In 2267, you imposed economic sanctions on the Vorsh until they had no choice but to become your vassals. In 2273, you threatened military action against the Kepler colonies unless they surrendered their mineral rights. Should I continue? I have records going back 87 years. That is just your personal record, Ambassador. The Empire has been doing this for centuries. Calvin stood up. His confidence was cracking. That is all perfectly legal under Galactic Council law, he said. We have violated no treaties. Katie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Legal and right are not always the same thing, Ambassador. You have hidden behind technicalities while bullying smaller species for generations. You have mistaken our patience for weakness. You have mistaken our desire for peace as an inability to fight. That was a serious error in judgment. Governor Hayes turned back to face Calvin. These negotiations are over, he said quietly. You and your crew will leave New Montana within 24 hours. Do not return unless you are invited. And Ambassador, the next time you try to threaten a human colony, remember this conversation. Calvin felt anger rising in him. You are making a mistake, he said. The Empire does not respond well to defiance. Katie Sullivan stepped closer to him. Neither do we, Ambassador, she said softly. The difference is that we have learned to control our responses. We have rules and laws that govern our actions. We have spent centuries learning how to be civilized. But make no mistake, those rules exist to protect our enemies from us, not the other way around. You would do well to remember that. She opened the door. The meeting is over, she said. Please leave. Calvin left the room with as much dignity as he could manage, but inside he was shaking. He had seen something in those human eyes that he had not expected. It was not fear. It was not weakness. It was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Back aboard the Crimson Spire, Commander Velkoth was waiting for him. The military officer listened to Calvin's report with growing fury. His scales darkened, which was a sign of extreme anger in Zixthari. They dare to refuse us? Velkoth said. These soft little creatures dare to defy the Empire? This cannot stand. We must teach them a lesson they will never forget. Calvin felt uncertain for the first time in his career. Perhaps we should simply leave, he said. Report to the High Command and let them decide how to proceed. No, Velkoth said firmly. If we leave with our tail between our legs, every species in this sector will think they can refuse the Empire. We must act now. Tomorrow at dawn we will attack Riverside. We will show them what happens to those who defy us. Are you certain? Calvin asked. He could not shake the memory of Katie Sullivan's cold smile and hard eyes. I am certain, Velkoth said. They are humans, Ambassador. They have... Vexthar stared at the security screen. He could not believe what he was seeing. The corridor in Sector 7 had been transformed. The humans had built barriers from storage containers and metal panels. They had created a kill zone. Every angle was covered. Every approach was a death trap. But the defenses were not what shocked him. It was how the humans fought. The Krellians rushed down the corridor, 50 of them at least, screeching, firing weapons. Their natural armor should have protected them. Their numbers should have overwhelmed any defense, but the humans did not panic. They did not run. Kyle stood behind the main barrier. He fired his rifle in short, controlled bursts. Each shot hit a target. Each target fell. He did not waste ammunition. He did not spray and pray like most species did in combat. Every bullet had a purpose. Amy moved along the side. She carried a smaller weapon. Her movements were calculated, precise. She flanked the Krellians while they focused on Kyle. Her shots hit weak points in their armor. Joints, eyes, soft spots under the shells. She knew exactly where to aim. Jake commanded from the center. His voice never rose, never showed fear. He called out targets, directed fire, adjusted tactics in real time. Danny moved equipment and ammunition. Lisa stood ready with medical supplies. They worked together like a single organism. The first wave of Krellians died in less than 2 minutes. The second wave came, then the third. The humans kept firing, kept moving, kept fighting. Vexithar watched for 20 minutes, then 30, then an hour. The humans never stopped, never slowed down. They just held the line. Impossible, Vexithar whispered. This is impossible. His lieutenant stood beside him. The younger Saurian was also watching the screen. Commander, how are they doing this? They are so small, so weak, yet they fight like apex predators. Vexithar had no answer. He had studied human biology. They had no natural weapons. Their muscles were weaker than most species. Their bones broke easily. Everything about them suggested they should be prey animals. But prey animals did not fight like this. A Krellian plasma bolt hit Kyle's barrier. The explosion knocked him back. He fell hard. Lisa immediately moved to him. She dragged him behind cover while Amy provided covering fire. Kyle was wounded. Blood ran down his arm, but he was conscious. Angry even. Just a scratch, Kyle said through gritted teeth. Lisa worked on his arm quickly. She injected something. Applied bandages. The whole process took maybe 30 seconds. Then Kyle picked up his rifle again. He returned to his position and kept firing. Vexithar's eyes widened. The human had been injured, bleeding, in pain, but he kept fighting. Most species would retreat when wounded, seek medical care, wait for healing. Not this human. He just kept going. The pattern repeated across the battle. Danny took a hit to his leg. He limped but continued moving supplies. Amy's weapon overheated. She switched to a backup without missing a beat. Jake's armor cracked from a near miss. He ignored it completely. They adapted constantly. When the Krellians tried to flank them, the humans repositioned. When the insects used heavier weapons, the humans changed their tactics. They learned from each wave, got better, more efficient. It was like watching a machine learn and improve. 2 hours into the battle, Vexithar's other positions were struggling. The Krellians were pushing hard. Several Saurian warriors had fallen. They were running out of ammunition, running out of time. The evacuation was nearly complete, but they needed just a bit longer. Then he looked at Sector 7 again. The humans were still fighting, still holding. They had been in continuous combat for 2 hours. No breaks, no rest, just constant fighting. How were they not exhausted? Vexithar opened a communication channel. Captain Morrison, status report. Jake's response came immediately. His breathing was heavy but controlled. We're holding, Commander. Ammunition at 40%. No serious casualties. We can keep this up. For how long? Vexithar asked. As long as you need, sir. The certainty in Jake's voice struck Vexithar. This was not bravado, not false courage. The human captain truly believed they could hold indefinitely, and based on what Vexithar was seeing, he might be right. Something clicked in Vexithar's mind. He had been thinking about this wrong. He had been fighting defensively, trying to minimize losses, buying time. But the humans were not thinking that way. They were thinking about winning. Captain Morrison, Vexthar said slowly. What if we did not just hold? What if we attacked? There was a pause. Then Jake laughed. Actually laughed in the middle of a battle. Now you're talking, Commander. What did you have in mind? Vexthar looked at the tactical map. An idea formed. A crazy idea. The kind of idea that would either save them all or kill everyone. The Krellian flagship. It is attached to the station's outer hull. If we could sever that connection, the ship would drift away. It would cripple their command structure. I like it, Jake said. How do we get there? Through the maintenance tunnels. But they will be filled with Krellians. It would take a small team. Fast and deadly. A suicide mission. Send me the route, Jake said. We'll handle it. Captain, you misunderstand. This is not your fight. I will send my warriors. Commander? Jake's voice was firm. We've been holding Sector 7 for 2 hours. My team is warmed up and ready. Your warriors are exhausted from heavy fighting. We're the logical choice. Besides, Kyle really wants to blow something up. He gets cranky when he doesn't get to blow things up. In the background, Vexthar heard Kyle's voice. It's true, I do get cranky. Despite everything, Vexthar felt himself smile. These humans were insane. Absolutely insane. But they were also right. His warriors were tired. The humans somehow were not. Very well, Captain. I am sending you the coordinates. Do not die, that is an order. We'll do our best, sir. Vexthar transmitted the data. Then he watched as the humans left their position. They moved through the maintenance tunnels like shadows. Fast. Silent. Professional. This was not beginner's luck. This was training. Years of training. Perhaps centuries of training. The tunnels were narrow and dark. Perfect ambush territory. The Krellians had guards posted, but the humans dealt with them efficiently. Amy spotted the guards first. She used hand signals to communicate. Kyle and Jake moved forward. Their weapons had suppressors. The shots were almost silent. The guards fell without alerting others. They reached the flagship's docking port. Kyle examined the structure. He pulled out explosive charges from his pack, small but powerful. He placed them carefully at key stress points. His hands were steady despite the danger, despite the wounds he carried. Charges set, Kyle reported. We've got maybe 60 seconds to get clear once I trigger them. Then let's not waste time, Jake said. They started back through the tunnels. Then alarms blared. The Krellians had discovered them. Dozens of insect warriors poured into the tunnels from both directions. The humans were trapped. Surrounded. Vexthar watched helplessly from the command center. There were too many Krellians. Even these incredible humans could not fight their way through. He opened the comm channel. Captain, you need to abort. Get out of there. Negative, Commander, Jake said. Weapons fire echoed in the background. We didn't come this far to quit now. Kyle, trigger the charges. With pleasure, Kyle said. The explosion rocked the entire station. The docking clamps shattered. The Krellian flagship tore away from the station's hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically. The massive ship drifted away, crippled and helpless. But what about the humans? Vexthar pulled up their location. The tunnel they were in had been partially destroyed by the blast. Emergency barriers had deployed. They were sealed in, trapped with dozens of Krellians. I am sending warriors to extract you, Vexthar said. Don't bother, Jake replied. His voice was strained now, breathing hard. We'll cut through them and meet you on the other side. Just keep those evacuation ships moving. Captain, there are too many. You cannot watch us. The comm went silent except for weapons fire. Vexthar could only watch the tactical display. The human signals moved through the tunnel, slowly, fighting every step. Krellian signals vanished one by one. The humans were outnumbered 5-1, but they were winning. 10 minutes later, the humans emerged from the tunnel. All 5 of them. Wounded, exhausted, covered in blood, some of it their own, but alive, still fighting, still moving forward. Vexthar felt something strange in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in decades, since he was young and witnessed his father's final battle. It was respect, pure, genuine respect for warriors who had earned it through blood and determination. The loss of their flagship threw the Krellians into chaos. Their attack faltered, became disorganized. Vexithar's warriors pushed back, reclaimed lost sections. The tide was turning, but the battle was not over yet. The Krellians were retreating now, but they were angry, desperate, and desperate enemies were the most dangerous kind. Vexthar knew what would come next. The Krellians would make one final attack. They would try to destroy what they could not have. He looked at the security feed. The humans had returned to Sector 7. They were reloading weapons, checking ammunition, treating wounds, getting ready for the next fight. They did not complain, did not ask for relief, they just prepared. For the first time since the battle began, Vexthar allowed himself to hope. The detention facility on New Montana was quiet and orderly. Kelvin spent his days reading, thinking, and slowly coming to understand how completely he had misunderstood humanity. Other Zixthari prisoners adapted in different ways. Some, like Commander Velkoth, remained angry and defiant. Others became withdrawn and depressed. A few, like Kelvin, began to question everything they had been taught. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Zixthari Empire demanded the immediate release of their personnel. The Empire's ambassador to the Galactic Council delivered angry speeches about human aggression and violations of diplomatic protocols. They threatened economic sanctions and military action. But something unexpected happened. Several smaller species that had been bullied by the Zixthari for generations began to speak up. They presented their own evidence of Zixthari aggression. They shared stories of forced relocations, unfair trade agreements, and threats of violence. What started as a case against humanity became an examination of Zixthari behavior across the entire galaxy. The human representative to the Galactic Council was Ambassador Claire Donovan. She was an older woman with white hair and a calm manner that reminded Kelvin of a teacher. But when she spoke, the entire council listened. She had spent years building relationships with other species, earning trust through consistent honesty and reliability. Ambassador Donovan presented her case with methodical precision. She showed video evidence from the Crimson Spire's own systems. The recordings clearly showed Commander Velkoth giving the order to fire on Riverside, a civilian settlement. She cited 17 different Galactic Council laws and treaties that the Zixthari had violated. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She presented a massive dossier of Zixthari violations going back 3 centuries. Humans had been quietly documenting everything since they joined the Council. Every forced relocation, every unfair treaty, every threat and act of aggression. It was all there, organized and cross-referenced, impossible to deny. The Galactic Council chamber was silent as ambassadors from dozens of species looked at the evidence. Some looked angry. Others looked ashamed that they had not acted sooner. The Zixthari ambassador tried to defend his government, but his words rang hollow against such overwhelming proof. On New Montana, Kelvin watched the proceedings on the facility's communication screen. Katie Sullivan had given him access to Earth's historical databases as part of what she called a cultural exchange program. At first he had refused, but boredom and curiosity eventually won out. What he discovered horrified him. Human history was darker than anything he had imagined. They had fought wars where millions died. Cities were destroyed. Entire populations were wiped out. They had created weapons so terrible that using them could end all life on their planet. He read about something called the World Wars. Tens of millions dead in conflicts that spanned the globe. He read about nuclear weapons that could vaporize cities in seconds. He read about genocides where people tried to eliminate entire groups of other people. The numbers were staggering. The cruelty was beyond comprehension, but the database also showed what came after. He read about the Geneva Conventions, international laws designed to limit the horrors of war. He read about the United Nations, an organization created to prevent global conflicts. He read about decades of slow, painful progress toward a world where nations could settle disputes without violence. Katie Sullivan visited him one afternoon. She found him in the common area, surrounded by data pads showing images from human wars. He looked up at her with haunted eyes. "How did you survive?" he asked. "How did your species not destroy itself?" Katie sat down across from him. "We almost did several times," she said quietly. "Nuclear weapons brought us to the edge. We had enough bombs to make our planet uninhabitable. For decades, we lived with the knowledge that we could end everything in an afternoon." "What changed?" Kelvin asked. "Fear," Katie said. "Not fear of our enemies, fear of ourselves. We looked at what we had become and we were terrified. So we made a choice. We decided that survival was more important than victory. Cooperation was more important than domination. Peace was more important than proving who was strongest." She gestured at the data pads. "Every rule you see documented there was paid for in blood. The Geneva Conventions were written after people saw the horrors of war crimes. The nuclear treaties were signed after we understood what atomic weapons could do. The Terran Conventions on Civilian Protection were created after we accidentally killed millions of innocent people. We didn't become peaceful because we're naturally kind. We became peaceful because we learned how terrible the alternative was. But you still have weapons," Kelvin said. "You still have the capacity for violence. I saw what your ships did to the Crimson Spire." "Yes," Katie agreed. "We kept our weapons because the galaxy is not safe. But we built rules around those weapons. Rules about when they can be used, how they can be used, and most importantly, when they must not be used. Those rules exist to protect our enemies from us, Ambassador. They remind us that even in war there are lines we must not cross." Kelvin was quiet for a long time. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him since his capture. "Why are you helping me understand this? Why not just lock me away and forget about me?" Katie smiled sadly. "Because punishment alone doesn't change anything. If we just imprison you and your crew, you will remain bitter and angry. You will learn nothing. But if we can help you understand why we do things differently, maybe you can help your own people change. Maybe this incident can lead to something better." While Kelvin struggled with these ideas, events continued to unfold in the larger galaxy. The Zixthari Empire faced a choice. They could escalate to open war with humanity, which their own military analysts now admitted would be a disaster. The humans had been deliberately hiding their true capabilities, not out of weakness but to avoid seeming threatening. Or the Empire could accept consequences for centuries of aggressive behavior. The supreme overlord of the Zixthari was a being named Thextral. He was ancient even by Zixthari standards, having ruled for over a century. He had built his power on military strength and an image of invincibility. Accepting defeat from humans would undermine everything he represented, but Thextral had not survived so long by being stupid. He read the military reports. He understood that humanity had naval superiority in this sector. More importantly, he saw what was happening in the Galactic Council. Other species were losing their fear of the Zixthari. If he pushed this conflict, he might find himself at war with a coalition of species, not just humanity. So Thextral made a decision that shocked his entire government. He agreed to meet with human leadership, not to negotiate from strength, but to find a path forward that did not end in mutual destruction. The meeting was held on a neutral Galactic Council space station. Supreme Overlord Thextral arrived with a large delegation, trying to maintain an appearance of power. President Linda Carter of the United Human Systems came with a small group of advisors, including Ambassador Donovan and Katie Sullivan. The initial discussions were tense. Thextral demanded the release of his personnel. President Carter refused until they faced justice. Thextral threatened economic sanctions. President Carter pointed out that dozens of species were now willing to trade with humanity, instead of the Zixthari. Then President Carter made an offer that changed everything. She proposed that the Zixthari Empire acknowledge its violations of Council law and make restitution to harmed species. In exchange, humanity would help them transition from a conquest-based economy to a system based on fair trade and mutual benefit. It was a generous offer, far more generous than the Zixthari would have given in the same situation. Thextral was suspicious. "Why would you help us?" he asked. "We attacked you. We threatened your people." President Carter looked at him with steady eyes. "Because we remember being where you are now," she said. "Arrogant, convinced of our superiority, willing to use violence to get what we wanted. It took us centuries of bloodshed to learn that might does not make right. We lost hundreds of millions of lives learning that lesson. If we can help you learn it without paying that terrible price, then maybe all those deaths meant something. She continued, we are not doing this out of kindness or mercy, though we hope to be both kind and merciful. We are doing this because we understand cause and effect. If we crush you militarily, we become the bullies. We become what you were, and that cycle never ends. Someone must break it. We choose to break it now. Thextrel was quiet for a long time. His advisors whispered urgently to him, but he waved them to silence. Finally, he spoke. What you offer is unprecedented. But I must ask, what guarantee do we have that you will not simply dominate us once we are weakened? Ambassador Donovan answered this time. You have the same guarantee that every species in the Council has, she said. Our word backed by our actions. We have been in the galaxy for 7 years. In that time, have we ever broken a treaty? Have we ever acted in bad faith? Have we ever used our strength to bully the weak? She pulled up records on a display screen. Here are our trading agreements, all fair and balanced. Here are our diplomatic negotiations. 6 months had passed since the incident at New Montana. The galaxy was changing in ways that would have seemed impossible before. The Zixthari Empire was slowly becoming the Zixthari Commonwealth, a federation of previously conquered worlds now working together as equals. The transformation was messy and painful, but it was happening. Calvin's trial had concluded 3 months ago. The proceedings had been thorough and fair, exactly as the humans had promised. Governor Lucas Hayes had testified on Calvin's behalf, explaining that the ambassador had tried to prevent the attack and was following orders from Commander Velkoth. The human prosecutor, Attorney Nathan Price, acknowledged this but argued that diplomatic personnel had a responsibility to question illegal orders. In the end, Calvin was found guilty of complicity, but given a suspended sentence. Instead of prison, he was required to serve as a cultural liaison between humanity and the Zixthari Commonwealth. The judge, Justice Patricia Ross, explained that the sentence was designed to educate, rather than punish. Calvin would help both species understand each other better. Commander Velkoth received a harsher sentence. He was found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to 20 years in detention, with possibility of parole after 10. Even this shocked many species who expected the death penalty, but the humans explained that their justice system focused on rehabilitation over revenge. Even war criminals could change, they said, and deserved the chance to do so. Calvin now worked with a human team led by Dr. Frank Mitchell, a sociologist who specialized in helping societies recover from conflict. Frank's team included experts from many different human cultures, each bringing unique perspectives on how to build peaceful communities. They were patient and respectful, never forcing their ideas but offering suggestions and support. The work was harder than Calvin expected. The Zixthari Empire had been built on conquest for thousands of years. Changing that mindset required more than new laws or treaties. It required changing how people thought about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Dr. Mitchell explained it to Calvin one afternoon as they worked on plans for economic restructuring. Culture is like a river, he said. You cannot just dam it up and expect the water to disappear. You have to redirect it, channel it toward something positive. Your people have warrior traditions, honor codes, concepts of strength and courage. Those do not have to go away. They just need to be redirected toward defense and protection rather than conquest. Katie Sullivan had taken on a new role as director of the Galactic Peace Museum. The museum was located on a neutral space station and documented the histories of war and peace from dozens of species. The largest section was dedicated to human history, showing the progression from constant warfare to their current state of careful peace. Kelvin visited the museum during one of his trips to the council station. Walking through the exhibits was a sobering experience. He saw artifacts from human wars that killed millions. He saw reconstructions of destroyed cities. He saw weapons that could end civilizations. But he also saw treaties, peace agreements, and monuments to those who chose dialogue over violence. The most striking exhibit was called The Choice. It showed parallel timelines of different species and how they handled the development of advanced weapons. Some species achieved peace early and built stable civilizations. Others, like humanity, nearly destroyed themselves before learning cooperation. And a few species, now extinct, never learned at all. Young Zixthari were now attending human schools and universities. One student, a brilliant young female named Sixtel, was studying engineering at the new Montana Colonial Academy. She made friends with human students easily, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Calvin met Sixtel during a lecture series on comparative cultural development. She was smart and curious, asking questions that challenged both human and Zixthari assumptions. Her human friend, an engineering student named Chris Jordan, seemed completely comfortable around her, treating her like any other classmate. After the lecture, Sixtel approached Calvin. "Can I ask you something, Ambassador?" she said. He nodded, curious what she wanted to know. "Why did we think strength meant dominating others?" she asked. "I have been studying human history and other species' histories. Most civilizations figured out cooperation early. Why did we take so long?" Calvin was quiet for a moment. "Because it worked," he finally said. "For thousands of years, our approach gave us power and resources. We succeeded by being aggressive. It is hard to change a strategy that works even when you know it is wrong. But it did not really work, did it?" Sixtel said. "We had power, but everyone hated us. We had resources, but no real friends. The moment we showed weakness, other species were ready to abandon us. That is not success. That is just delayed failure." Her words struck Calvin deeply. She was right. The Zixthari Empire had been built on sand, held together by fear rather than loyalty. The moment that fear was removed, everything crumbled. But not all Zixthari were ready to change. A hardline faction calling themselves the Purity Front began causing trouble. They believed the old ways were better, and that working with humans was a betrayal of Zixthari culture. They sabotaged reconstruction projects and attacked Zixthari who cooperated with other species. The crisis came to a head when the Purity Front captured a human medical ship called Mercy's Light. The ship had been providing humanitarian aid to former Zixthari client worlds, treating sick and injured people regardless of species. Now 15 human doctors and nurses were hostages. The hostage takers made demands. All humans must leave Zixthari space immediately. All cooperation programs must end. The Commonwealth must return to traditional empire structure. If these demands were not met within 48 hours, they would begin executing hostages. Calvin watched the human response with great interest. Would they retaliate? Would they use this as an excuse to abandon the Zixthari? Would their patience finally run out? The human response was swift but measured. A special operations team led by Captain Julie Hammond was dispatched immediately. But they were ordered to minimize casualties and capture the hostage takers alive if possible. The goal was rescue, not revenge. The operation took 12 minutes from beginning to end. The human team infiltrated the captured ship with precision that bordered on artistic. They used non-lethal weapons whenever possible. When lethal force was absolutely necessary, it was applied with surgical accuracy. Every hostage was rescued safely. Most of the Purity Front members were captured alive. What happened next amazed Calvin even more than the rescue itself. The captured Purity Front members were given medical treatment for their injuries. They were provided legal representation. They would receive fair trials under Zixthari law, with human observers present to ensure justice was served properly. One of the hostages, Dr. Amy Rodriguez, gave an interview after her rescue. The reporter asked if she was angry at the Zixthari people after her ordeal. Her response became famous across the galaxy. "I am not angry at the Zixthari people," she said calmly. "I am sad for them. Those who took us hostage were products of a broken system, just as humans were once products of our own broken systems. They are afraid of change, afraid of losing their identity. I understand that fear. My ancestors felt it too when human society was transforming. So no, I am not angry. I just hope we can help them find a better way forward." Calvin met with Katie Sullivan after the hostage crisis was resolved. They sat in a quiet cafe on the council station, drinking human tea and talking about everything that had happened. "You could have used this as an excuse to abandon us," Calvin said. "Your people were attacked, held hostage, threatened with death. You would have been justified in walking away from the whole reconstruction program." Katie shook her head. "That would have been the easy path," she said. "But easy and right are not always the same thing. We knew there would be resistance to change. We knew some Zixthari would fight against the new system. If we gave up every time something went wrong, we would never help anyone change." She continued. "Besides, this is not charity. This is investment. We are investing time and resources now to create a more stable galaxy later. Every species that transitions from aggression to cooperation makes the galaxy safer for everyone, including us. This is not about being nice. This is about being smart. Kelvin thought about her words. The humans had a way of making even their kindness sound practical and logical. Maybe that was because they truly believed in what they were doing. They were not performing mercy. They were living it as a principle. Over the following months, the reconstruction continued. It was not smooth or easy. There were setbacks and frustrations. Some Zixthari refused to change no matter what, but slowly, gradually, things improved. Trade agreements were renegotiated fairly. Former client species gained real independence. Young Zixthari like Sixtel began building relationships with other species based on respect rather than fear. Kelvin found his role changing. He was no longer just a liaison. He had become an advocate for change within his own culture. He gave speeches at Zixthari universities, wrote articles for Commonwealth publications, and met with traditionalists to explain why the old ways had failed. 2 years had passed since the Crimson Spire fired upon Riverside. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous century. The Zixthari Commonwealth was now a functioning democracy, still struggling with its transition but committed to the path forward. Other species watched with interest, some considering similar changes to their own governments. Kelvin received an invitation that both surprised and moved him. New Montana was dedicating a memorial, and Governor Lucas Hayes personally requested his presence. The invitation said the memorial honored all victims of the incident. Kelvin was not sure what to expect, but he felt compelled to attend. He arrived on New Montana on a bright spring morning. The planet looked much as it had 2 years ago, peaceful and green. But Kelvin saw it with completely different eyes now. Where he once saw weakness, he now saw strength. Where he once saw easy prey, he now saw worthy allies. Governor Hayes, now retired from politics and teaching at the Colonial Academy, met him at the landing pad. The older human smiled warmly and shook Kelvin's hand, a gesture of respect that the ambassador had learned to appreciate. "Welcome back, Ambassador," Hayes said. "I'm glad you could come. There are some people who want to meet you." They walked through Riverside together. The city showed no signs of the attack that almost happened 2 years ago. Children played in parks. Merchants sold goods from a dozen different worlds, including Zixthari crafts and foods. Kelvin saw several young Zixthari walking among humans, clearly students at the academy. The memorial was located in the central plaza. It was a simple structure, elegant in its restraint. 2 figures stood back to back, one human and one Zixthari carved from white stone. Their weapons were lowered, pointing at the ground. Around the base were names carefully carved and preserved. Kelvin read the inscription. It said in multiple languages, including Zixthari, "In memory of all who suffered in the conflict of New Montana, may we remember that peace is not the absence of strength, but the choice to use that strength wisely." The names included both humans and Zixthari. Kelvin saw crew members from the Crimson Spire who had died from injuries after the battle. They were listed alongside human defenders who had been ready to protect their city. In death, they were equal. In memory, they were honored together. "I expected something different," Kelvin admitted to Hayes. "I thought this would be a monument to your victory, a reminder of our defeat and shame." Hayes shook his head. "Victory monuments are for conquerors," he said. "This is a peace memorial. It honors all victims of violence and reminds future generations why peace is worth fighting for. We do not celebrate what happened here. We remember it so that it never happens again." Katie Sullivan arrived for the dedication ceremony. She had become one of the most respected figures in galactic diplomacy. Her peace museum now visited by millions of beings from hundreds of species. She greeted Kelvin warmly and suggested they talk after the ceremony. The dedication was attended by hundreds of humans and dozens of Zixthari, including several students from the academy. The mayor of Riverside, an elderly woman named Dorothy Grant, spoke about the importance of forgiveness and understanding. A Zixthari elder spoke about learning from mistakes and building a better future. After the ceremony, Kelvin and Katie walked through the gardens surrounding the memorial. They found a quiet bench and sat down, watching people place flowers at the base of the monument. "I need to ask you something," Kelvin said. "It has bothered me for 2 years. Why did you give us another chance? After we attacked your people, threatened your colony, showed you nothing but contempt. Why did you not destroy us? You had every right to retaliate with overwhelming force. Katie was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she spoke, and her words were careful and sincere. Because we have been where you were, she said. Arrogant, convinced of our superiority, willing to use violence to get what we wanted. It took us centuries of bloodshed to learn that true strength is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself, she continued. We gave you another chance because we were once given that chance by our own people who refused to let us destroy ourselves. After our worst wars, there were always voices calling for more revenge, more violence. But other voices called for peace, for understanding, for building something better. Those peaceful voices eventually won, but it cost us dearly. We are just paying that mercy forward. Kelvin thought about this. So you help others because you were helped? Not exactly, Katie said. We help others because we understand the cycle of violence. We know that crushing you would not have solved anything. It would have made us into the bullies, the conquerors. Then someone would eventually rise up against us and the cycle would continue forever. Someone has to break that cycle. We chose to break it. She turned to look directly at him. Also, we saw potential in you, Ambassador. You tried to stop the attack. You questioned your orders. You were capable of doubt, which meant you were capable of change. We wanted to give you the chance to become what you could be, not punish you for what you had been. Later that afternoon, Katie took Kelvin to a special exhibit at the Peace Museum's New Montana branch. It was a timeline of human history, but presented in a way he had never seen before. It showed not just the wars and violence, but the slow evolution of rules and laws designed to limit that violence. See this, Katie said, pointing to an ancient document. The Code of Hammurabi, over 4,000 years old. One of the first written law codes. It tried to limit revenge by requiring proportional justice. An eye for an eye, not a life for an eye. It was harsh by modern standards, but it was progress. She moved along the timeline. The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Terran Conventions on Warfare. Each one was written after we saw what happened without rules. Each one cost lives to create, but together, they taught us how to be civilized even in conflict. The exhibit was titled The Greatest Victory. Kelvin asked about this name. Because this is humanity's real achievement, Katie explained. Not that we stopped fighting. We have not. We still have conflicts and disagreements, but we learned to fight differently. With rules, with restraint, with the goal of ending conflict rather than achieving total victory. And when we do have to fight, we never forget that our enemies are still people who deserve dignity and rights. The incident at New Montana had reshaped galactic politics in profound ways. Dozens of species had approached humanity asking for help with their own transitions from aggressive to peaceful societies. The Institute for Peaceful Transition, led by Dr. Frank Mitchell, now had branch offices on 12 different worlds. Some species worried that humans were becoming the new dominant power, replacing the Zixthari as the galaxy's superpower. Ambassador Claire Donovan addressed this concern directly at a Galactic Council session that Kelvin attended. We have no interest in domination, she said firmly. We have seen where that path leads. What we offer is partnership, cooperation, and the hard lessons we learned about building peaceful civilizations. Take them or leave them, but we will defend ourselves and our allies, and we will uphold the laws that protect innocent life. That is not domination. That is responsibility. Her words were met with thoughtful silence, then cautious agreement from most species. They had seen human actions match human words for years now. Trust was building, slowly but steadily. Kelvin had undergone his own transformation over these 2 years. He was no longer just a liaison between species. He had become a teacher and advocate for change. His most popular lecture, given at universities across the Commonwealth, was titled, "We Mistook Mercy for Weakness." In the lecture, he analyzed how the Zixthari had completely misread human nature. He explained how they had confused patience with cowardice, restraint with inability. He showed how this mistake nearly cost the Zixthari everything, and how humanity's response had saved both species from a devastating war. Young Zixthari like Sixtel were building a new vision for their species. They honored their warrior traditions but directed that strength toward protection, rather than conquest. They took pride in their history but acknowledged its failures. They were creating something new, something better. On Kelvin's last evening on New Montana, he stood at an observation point overlooking Riverside. Captain Greg Palmer joined him. The captain had retired from active military service and now ran a program training peacekeeping forces from various species. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. "You once asked me why we have so many rules about warfare," Palmer said quietly. "Why we limit ourselves when our enemies might not. I want to tell you the truth." Kelvin listened carefully. "It is not about being fair to our enemies," Palmer continued. "It is about protecting ourselves from becoming the monsters we are capable of being. Every rule, every restriction, every protection for civilians is a wall we built to contain our own capacity for destruction. Because we know that once you cross certain lines, you can never come back." He looked at Kelvin with eyes that had seen things the ambassador could only imagine. "We learned this the hard way. We crossed those lines many times in our history, and each time we lost part of our humanity, we became things we could not recognize when we looked in the mirror.